I have been working with animal rescue organizations for almost 10 years now. I have seen suffering in many forms, in many countries, in many species. But nothing could prepare me for what I was about to find in a small village in Borneo. The mission started like many others, a tip from a local informant about illegal wildlife trade. I landed in a small airport surrounded by dense jungle and humidity that made it hard to breathe. A local contact picked me up in an old truck with no air conditioning. We drove for 3 hours on broken roads that cut through palm oil plantations. The landscape was scarred, trees gone, red earth exposed, smoke rising in the distance. I asked my contact about the location, but he only said it was a place tourists never see. We arrived at a village with wooden houses on stilts and stray dogs wandering the muddy paths. The air smelled of burning plastic and rotting fruit. I was told to wait near a small shop while my contact spoke to someone inside a house. Children stared at me from a distance, curious but cautious. An old woman sitting on a porch looked away when I made eye contact. Something felt wrong, but I could not yet say what. My contact returned and gestured for me to follow him quietly. We walked behind a row of houses toward a concrete structure half hidden by vegetation. It looked abandoned. Walls cracked, roof covered in moss, no windows. But there was a padlock on the door, shiny and new. My contact whispered that this was the place. I felt my heartbeat rise as I approached the rusty metal door. Through a small gap in the wall, I saw only darkness inside. But then I heard something. A low, raspy breath followed by the sound of chains dragging on concrete. I pressed my eye to the gap and waited for my vision to adjust to the dark. And then I saw her. 2 amber eyes staring back at me from the shadows. Not moving, not blinking. Just watching, waiting. I stepped back from the wall, my hands trembling. My contact warned me that the owner could return at any moment. We had no legal authority here, no police support, no backup. I needed to see more before making any decision. I found a loose board on the side of the structure and carefully pulled it open. A shaft of light entered the darkness, revealing the horror inside. An adult female orangutan sat on the filthy concrete floor. Her wrists were bound by heavy rusted chains attached to a metal post. Her orange fur was thin and falling out in patches, exposing gray, irritated skin beneath. Her belly was swollen from malnutrition, her ribs visible through her sides. She did not move when the light hit her face. Her eyes, once bright, were dull and lifeless. Flies circled around open sores on her arms and legs. The smell inside was unbearable. Urine, feces, rotting food scraps. A metal bowl near her contained dirty water with insects floating on the surface. I felt rage rising in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. My contact explained that she had been here for years, used as a photo attraction for tourists. People paid money to take pictures with her, then left her in this dungeon. When the tourists stopped coming, the owner simply abandoned her here. She was too weak to be sold, too sick to be displayed, so she was left to die in the dark. I took photos and videos with my phone, documenting everything. My hands were shaking so much I had to steady myself against the wall. The orangutan slowly turned her head toward me. For a moment, our eyes met. She lifted one hand slightly, chains rattling, as if reaching out. Then she let it fall again, too exhausted to hold it up. That gesture broke something inside me. I could not leave her here another night. But freeing her now, without veterinary support, could kill her. Her body was too fragile, her condition too severe. I needed help and I needed it fast. I told my contact to find a signal and call our emergency rescue team. Time was running out. The rescue team arrived 6 hours later in 2 vehicles loaded with equipment. A veterinarian, 2 animal handlers, and a transport crate designed for great apes. I briefed them on the situation while we walked toward the concrete structure. The padlock on the door was cut with bolt cutters in seconds. The metal door swung open, and the smell hit us all at once. One of the handlers stepped back, covering his nose. The veterinarian put on gloves and a mask and entered first. I followed close behind with a flashlight. The orangutan was in the same position, sitting against the wall, chains still attached. She did not react to our presence. No fear, No aggression. Nothing. The vet knelt beside her slowly, speaking in a soft, calm voice. She examined the animal's eyes, mouth, and skin without touching the chains yet. She told us the orangutan was severely dehydrated and malnourished. Her muscles had atrophied from years of immobility. The sores on her body were infected, but not life-threatening if treated soon. But the chains were the immediate problem. The metal had cut into her wrists over time, creating deep wounds that had partially healed around the rust. Removing them carelessly could cause severe bleeding or nerve damage. The vet prepared a mild sedative to keep the orangutan calm during the process. I held the flashlight steady as she injected the solution into the animal's arm. Within minutes, the orangutan's body relaxed. Her breathing slowed. One handler held her arms gently while the other used a small saw to cut through the chains. The sound of metal breaking echoed in the dark room. When the first chain fell to the ground, I felt tears forming in my eyes. The second chain followed moments later. For the first time in years, her arms were free. The vet immediately cleaned and bandaged the wounds on her wrists. We carefully lifted her onto a stretcher and carried her out of the structure. The moment she crossed the doorway, sunlight touched her face. Her eyes, still half closed from the sedative, flickered. A small reaction, but it was there. She was feeling the sun for the first time in years. We loaded her into the transport crate and began the long drive to the rescue center. I sat beside the crate the entire way, watching her breathe. The rescue center was a 4-hour drive through winding jungle roads. Halfway there, the orangutan's condition suddenly changed. Her breathing became shallow and irregular. The vet checked her vital signs and told us her heart rate was dropping. Her body was going into shock from the stress of the rescue. We pulled over on the side of the road surrounded by thick jungle. The vet climbed into the back of the vehicle and prepared an emergency IV line. She inserted the needle into the orangutan's arm and began administering fluids. I held the IV bag above my head while the vet monitored her pulse. Minutes passed in complete silence. The only sound was the hum of insects outside and the faint drip of the IV. I watched the orangutan's chest, counting each breath, fearing each one would be the last. The vet said the next 10 minutes would determine everything. If her body did not respond to the fluids, there was nothing more we could do here. I found myself whispering to her, telling her to hold on, telling her she was safe now. Her eyes remained closed, her body still. Then, slowly, her breathing deepened. Her chest rose higher with each inhale. The vet checked her pulse again and said it was stabilizing. Color began returning to her lips and gums. She was fighting back. I let out a breath I did not realize I was holding. The vet said we could continue driving, but slowly. I stayed in the back with her, my hand resting gently near her arm. She did not open her eyes, but at one point her fingers moved slightly toward my hand. We arrived at the rescue center as the sun was setting. A medical team was waiting at the entrance with a prepared enclosure. They took her inside immediately for full examination and treatment. I stood outside the medical building, exhausted but relieved. She had survived the hardest part. Now the real recovery could begin. I stayed at the rescue center for 3 weeks to monitor her progress. The first few days were critical. IV fluids, antibiotics, specialized nutrition. She was too weak to stand, so the caretakers sat with her around the clock. Slowly, her body began to respond to the treatment. Her eyes, once dull and empty, started to show small sparks of awareness. She began eating soft fruits on her own, chewing slowly but steadily. The wounds on her wrists healed under clean bandages, changed twice daily. New fur started growing in the bald patches on her arms and back. By the second week, she was strong enough to sit up without support. The caretakers named her Cahaya, which means light in Indonesian. It was a perfect name for someone emerging from years of darkness. By the third week, Cahaya was moved to a larger enclosure with trees and ropes. I watched from outside as she touched a tree trunk for the first time in years. Her fingers wrapped around the bark, testing its texture. She pulled herself up slowly, her muscles remembering movements long forgotten. She climbed just a few feet, then stopped to rest. But she was climbing. After years in chains on a concrete floor, she was climbing. I visited her enclosure every day, sitting quietly on the other side of the fence. She would sometimes look at me, holding eye contact for several seconds. I never knew what she was thinking, but I hoped she understood. On my last day at the center, I went to say goodbye. Kahaya was sitting on a wooden platform in her enclosure, eating a banana. When she saw me, she stopped eating and moved closer to the fence. She extended one arm through the bars, her hand open. I reached out and let her fingers touch mine. Her grip was gentle, her skin warm. We stayed like that for a long moment, saying nothing. Then she let go, turned around, and climbed up to a higher platform. She sat there, looking out at the trees beyond the center. I knew she still had months, maybe years, of rehabilitation ahead, but one day she would return to the forest where she belonged. I left the rescue center with her image burned into my mind. An orangutan who had been forgotten by the world had found her way back to life, and I had been lucky enough to witness it.